No one knows better than those who have served in the military how essential it is that we are all responsible for each other and for our communities.
My name is Tom Irwin, and I am a U.S. Marine veteran of Vietnam, and I will be your Master of Ceremonies for this morning. On behalf of the Missouri Historical Society, welcome to the grand reopening of St. Louis Soldiers Memorial Military Museum. It is a true honor to be here today with all of you for the unveiling of this thoughtfully restored monument to those who have died in the service to our nation and in defense of our cherished freedoms. This is both the solemn occasion, which we rededicate ourselves to the memory of those fallen, but a joyous occasion to celebrate a unique public-private partnership between the Missouri Historical Society and the City of St. Louis. The partnership began in 2015 when the Missouri Historical Society initiated a $30 million renovation of the museum and the Court of Honor. The Missouri Historical Society has been tireless in both preserving the historic fabric of this gorgeous classical-style building with its rich Art Deco flourishes. The museum you will visit today does not just meet, but exceeds best museum practices for collection care, environmental sustainability, and accessibility for visitors. Memorials to those who have served and died in conflicts in Korea and in Vietnam have been relocated to their own dedicated spaces in the Court of Honor. The result is a beautifully restored, accessible, reinvigorated Soldiers Memorial Military Museum that will tell the story of the military experience in St. Louis for generations to come. Please rise as you are able for the presenting of colors.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Army. Now I'd like you all, please take your seats, but I'd like you all to welcome Janine Rainey, who is president of the St. Louis chapter of the Gold Star Mothers of America. Miss Rainey's son was Lieutenant Daniel P. Reardon, more affectionately known by his soldiers as Lieutenant Dan. He was killed while serving in Iraq in 2007, when he would not allow his own troops to venture into harm's way, but instead went himself to investigative reports of an IED. He personified the ideals of loyalty, not just to his country, but to his soldiers, courage by going into harm's way, and sacrifice as he laid down his life for others in his command. Miss Rainey and her fellow Gold Star mothers will lead us in a pledge of allegiance. Ladies.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. And again, thank you, Army. The following story, I think, is extraordinary, and I hope you'll all agree with me. But in September of 1864, at Benton Barracks on the site of St. Louis Fairgrounds Park, Private Spotswood Rice took pen in hand to reassure his enslaved children that he, along with the United States Army, would be coming to free them soon. After the American Civil War, Spotswood Rice went on to found many African Methodist Episcopal churches throughout Missouri and the Southwest. His legacy of faith and service has been passed down through 5 generations serving in the American Armed Forces and in every major conflict since that time. Today, in living example of the past speaking to our shared present, we welcome Reverend Rice, 4 times grandson, back to St. Louis from his post in Germany to give our invocation. Please give a warm welcome to Army Chaplain Major Kyle Taylor.
Good morning. Can I invite you to please bow your heads and pray with me? Almighty and most merciful God, it is good for us to be here on this great morning because today represents years of planning and years of preparation by many faithful folks. But today also represents a tremendous labor of love as we endeavor to honor and pay tribute to the soldiers of this fair city who pledged a solemn oath to protect and to defend this great nation against all enemies. And in doing so, many of them made the ultimate sacrifice. The stories of these brave soldiers echo down to us today. We find many of their stories memorialized here. We find many of their families in attendance here. And we all find ourselves deeply indebted to them for their service and their sacrifice. So please, bless all who are assembled here today. Bless the Gold Star mothers who bear the great burden of loved ones lost and the tremendous pride that is uniquely their own. Bless those who had a hand in making this day possible and the many to come who will walk the halls of this majestic building. And finally, Lord, bless those who continue the good fight for freedom, who even now are in harm's way, doing difficult things in dangerous places. Give them the assurance of your presence and the strength of your protection. And we ask all this in your most magnificent and matchless name. Amen.
Thank you, Major. I think 5 generations of service to the United States deserves another round of applause. Representing the City of St. Louis Soldiers Memorial Commission, please welcome Colonel Judith Hanses, U.S. Army retired, who will read an excerpt from the remarks given by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt on the day this site was dedicated, October 14th, 1936.
Now, 82 years after this memorial to our war dead was dedicated, we celebrate joyfully this revitalization of St. Louis Soldiers Memorial, a visible symbol of our respect for the commitment of those who fought selflessly and died during World War I and in subsequent conflicts. First, let's look at the context of 1936, the year President Franklin Roosevelt dedicated this wonderful site and building began. The United States was recovering from the Great Depression and still had strides to make. Many citizens still needed work. The building project honored our war dead and gave life and livelihood to St. Louis residents. Thousands stood in these very streets to hear his dedication speech on October 14th, 1936, before I was born. He began, "You and I join here with the rest of the nation in dedicating this site as a memorial to the valiant dead of the World War. Here will rise a fitting structure, a symbol of devoted patriotism and unselfish service. We in America do not build monuments to war. We do not build monuments to conquest. We build monuments to commemorate the spirit of sacrifice in war. Reminders of our desire for peace. The memory of those whom the war called to the beyond urges us to consecrate the best that is in us to the service of country in times of peace. We best honor the memory of those dead by striving for peace, that the terror of the days of war will be with us no more. In what we have done during this past 3 years to promote national recovery at home, to extend the hand of the good neighbor to nations of the world, to break down the barriers to commerce which divide nation from nation. We are promoting the course of peace throughout the world. May the beauty of the monument which is rising on this site cast a beneficent light on the memories of our comrades. May its substantial structure typify the strength of their purpose, and may it inspire future generations with a desire to be of service to their fellows and their country. So spoke our president as the labor began to build this magnificent monument honoring St. Louis warriors and citizens who unselfishly gave the supreme sacrifice. Every person here today honors that intent.
Thank you, Judith. It's now my honor to introduce Dr. Francis Levine. Transforming Soldiers Memorial into a world-class museum has been a labor of several years for many Missouri historical staff members. That work has included everything from cataloging thousands of objects to overseeing the restoration of original Art Deco lighting fixtures, from the repair of the Gold Star's Mother's mosaic in the loggia, to doubling the exhibit space by entirely redesigning the lowest level of the museum. Perhaps more importantly, that's only the start of this innovative and important work that Dr. Levine's team will undertake once the museum opens to the public, as Soldiers Memorial Military Museum becomes a vibrant part of downtown St. Louis. So please welcome to the podium the president of the Missouri Historical Society, Dr. Francis Levine.
Good morning. It's with deep gratitude that I welcome you today to mark this momentous occasion in front of the meticulously restored Soldiers Memorial and the redesigned Court of Honor across Chestnut Street. Gene Mackey, our architect, worked closely with us on the redesign, but sadly died before he could see the work completed. I know today that he would be very proud, maybe just looking for one little detail that isn't quite the way he thought it might be. He always had his eye on those details. Soldiers Memorial, dedicated in 1936 to remember the service and ultimate sacrifice of World War I soldiers, is flanked by the monumental sculptures created by St. Louis-born artist Walker Hancock. The statues represent the values of courage and vision, loyalty and sacrifice, and you will see each of those values reflected in the exhibits inside the museum. In the restored Court of Honor, the broken bayonet sculpture by the artist Hillis Arnold symbolizes the end of World War II and a hope for lasting peace. The family of Walker Hancock and the family of Willis Arnold are here. Please recognize them as they stand. No project of this scale and scope comes into being without the dedication of time, treasure, and talent to its success. And as we all know, military history doesn't just happen far away. It has its direct impact on our communities, our neighborhoods, our families, and our daily lives. In the Jewish tradition, we say that a person can die twice. Once when the breath of life leaves the body, and once again when a person's name is no longer spoken and their lives are no longer remembered. It is this second death that we will prevent by telling the personal stories of men and women from St. Louis who have served and died in military service to our country. Their names will never be forgotten. Today is my privilege to thank the generous donors, supporters, contractors, and staff who have made it possible for us to tell a story that is America's story, but is also deeply local and personal. The Crawford Taylor Foundation, the Taylor family, and the late Jack Taylor, without whom none of this would be possible. Thank you so much to the Taylor family. Kim Tucci, Tom Irwin, Tim Noonan, and Jim Sonderman. It was your early attention to the needs of the Soldiers Memorial that began this journey to reopening. Thank you as well. The Guth Foundation, we thank you for the support for the restoration of Edwin Guth's exquisite lighting fixtures. You will never be anywhere in this community that you won't know the work of Edwin Guth. It's remarkable. And St. Louis Antique Lighting Restoration did the beautiful restoration work that you'll see today. The Bank of America, we thank you for your support of the oral histories that are in all of our exhibits and the ongoing education projects that we will undertake. I'd like to thank individual donors, including Dorothy J. Hegney, Karen and Lawrence Gehring, the United States Foundation for the Commemoration of the World Wars, the Pritzker Military Museum and Library, and members of our newly formed Soldiers Memorial Giving Circle. We're indebted to all of you. Your generosity and commitment have brought us to this grand reopening. See, that helps you keep warm. As you can imagine, it's required a great deal of time and talent to bring this project to fruition. Karen Gehring has been a devoted project leader for the revitalization of Soldiers Memorial. We appreciate her incredibly hard work in ensuring that this memorial will stand for years to come as a vital state-of-the-art museum dedicated to preserving and sharing American military history through the lens of its impact on St. Louis. Karen, please stand. Of course, there's a large staff of people who have been responsible for many different phases of revitalization, from artifact installation to security and facilities, to the accountants who pay our bills, to the educators who will carry the programming forward. All of them should be recognized for the work they have done and the work they will do for sharing this memorial museum with you for years to come. Will the staff who are still awake please stand to be acknowledged? It's a great privilege to work alongside of every one of my staff members. There are some who've been working 72 hours straight, and I think they left. When you came in, they went out the back door. Rich Bradley, President of the Board of Public Service for the city, has been one of our facilitators and advisors about city process, and he's become a tremendous supporter for the work that we've done now and going into the future. Along with Rich, we must recognize Vernon Ambos and Dr. Linnea Magnuson, the city liaison, who led volunteers in a heroic effort to honor the service of men and women from St. Louis. Please stand and thank Rich, Linnea, and Vernon for their dedication. In support of the staff have been our outstanding partner contractors, including Mackie Mitchell, our architects. I know Jim Conrad is here today. I don't know whether Eric Biggs is, but Jim, Eric, thank you so much for all the work that you did on this project. BSI constructors, Mark Whalen, I see you there. Joe Kaiser, I see you. Please stand. Mark and Joe, you led a remarkable project. Thank you so much. We have many, many artisans and crafts who worked on this building. I'd like to thank Gallagher and Associates, who led the design of our galleries, and the Solomon Group. I know that Gary Solomon is here. Gary, I'm not sure how many of your team are here, but if the exhibition fabricators are still standing, could you just wave? I don't want to ask you to stand up again. Thank you. Logic Systems was our audio-visual contractors, and you will get to play the games and search the history of individual metals and artifacts with the marvelous media components that Logic Systems created. Wide Awake Films produced the World War I film in our temporary exhibit on the lower level. Along with them, there have been so many trade members whose work you will see in details large and small. I want to thank everyone who worked on this project, inside and out, for your vision, your service, and your hard work. Tom and I are going to try to do this in tandem, so just give us a minute.
Thank you, Fran. A project of this kind succeeds when it springs from a robust public-private partnership. We've been humbled by the broad support the revitalization of the Soldiers Memorial has received from many elected officials. You will hear from a few of them today, who will also be introduced as they speak, but we wish to also recognize several others. We ask that you stand as you're introduced. United States Senator Roy Blunt and Claire McCaskill were regretfully unable to join us today, but we're grateful to have with us on the stage Mary Beth Luna, representing Senator Blunt, and Brandon Fahey, representing Senator McCaskill. Missouri State Senator Gina Walsh is with us today. As I know, we have State Senator Donna Behringer, Gretchen Bangert, and Michael Butler. I guess we don't know. To, I think, my right and left are many members of the St. Louis Board of Aldermen. And this couldn't have happened without the Board of Aldermen, plain and simple. The unanimous support of the Board of Aldermen finalized the public-private partnership that underpins Soldiers Memorial. Would members of the Board of Aldermen, right and left, please stand to be recognized today?
Of course, the Missouri Historical Society could not have undertaken this project without the full support of our board and our sub-district commissioners. Dan Cole, our board president, and Frank Hampshire, chair of the Missouri History Museum Sub-District Commission, are on stage with us today, and many board and commission members are in the audience. Please stand and be recognized.
Jim Sonderman, who is the chair of the Soldiers Memorial Commission, is on the stage with us. And all our commissioners who have also joined us in the audience, would you please stand to be recognized?
Members of the Accessibility Committee were integral to ensuring that the museum not only meets but exceeds accessibility standards. Please give them a round of applause. If we have forgotten anyone, if you didn't hear your name, please know that we appreciate you enormously, but it's a mark of the overwhelming support that this project has received. Please know that we are deeply grateful for your support and the service you have given. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Levine. Now I'd like to welcome to the podium a good friend, certainly a good friend of Soldiers Memorial, a good friend of mine. Please welcome the Honorable Lacey Clay, United States Congressman for the Missouri's 1st Congressional District.
Thank you and good morning, St. Louis. You know, it's a great honor to be with you today as we rededicate this magnificent memorial that symbolizes the courage, loyalty, vision, and sacrifice so many brave St. Louisans who have given the ultimate sacrifice in the defense of freedom. I want to thank the Guth Foundation, the Crawford Taylor Foundation, and the Taylor Family Foundation for making this beautiful $30 million renovation possible. Can we please give them a big hand? I also want to congratulate Dr. Francis Levine and her incredible staff at the Missouri Historical Society for leading this remarkable project. I know that going forward, the Soldiers Memorial will be in good hands. Lastly, I want to thank a great civic leader who made sure that I was always kept in the loop on this project. And besides being the retiring executive director of Civic Progress, he is also a highly decorated Marine Combat Vietnam veteran. He loves his country. He loves St. Louis. Please give a nice hand to Tom Irwin. Thank you, Tom. As the senior member of Congress for this region, I'm truly blessed to represent over 50,000 veterans. My office has been able to help thousands of them who call on us for assistance with the VA, Social Security, and even with their final arrangements at Jefferson Barracks. We're always honored to serve them because they have served all of us so well. But there is another service to veterans that we never publicize because it's too painful. When one of my constituents serving in the armed services is killed in action, my staff and I immediately provide 24/7 support to their families, and we stand with them when the remains of their fallen hero comes home for the last time. Since I was first elected to Congress, we have had to perform that sad duty 11 times, and each time it is the same. The moment when a family sees the flag-draped casket of their loved one for the first time, it is heartbreaking. There are no words adequate to relieve their pain. There are no prayers which can alleviate their grief. All I can offer is my solemn commitment to always be there for them, to honor the brave sacrifice of their fallen hero, and to remember to teach the lesson that each generation of Americans must learn from honored places like the Soldiers Memorial. Freedom is never free. And as was mentioned earlier, 82 years ago, when President Franklin Roosevelt came to St. Louis to celebrate the construction of this magnificent building, he said, "We in America do not build monuments to war. We do not build monuments to conquest. We build monuments to commemorate the spirit of sacrifice in war, reminders of our desire for peace." Thank you, and God bless you all, and God bless the United States of America.
Thank you, Congressman. Now it's my pleasure to introduce the Mayor of the City of St. Louis, the Honorable Lyda Krewson. Mayor?
Good morning. Soldiers Memorial first opened its doors to the public 80 years ago to honor 1,075 local area soldiers who gave the ultimate sacrifice during World War I. Today, thanks to the incredible generosity of the St. Louis philanthropic community, I am so privileged to be standing here with you for the reopening 80 years later of this restored landmark. In 1938, on Memorial Day, was the opening of Soldiers Memorial. There is one person with us today who was there on Memorial Day in 1938. He was 4 years old. He went on to serve in the U.S. Marines, and today we recognize Tom Gilmore, who's sitting here with us on the aisle, who is maybe the only person here today who was here in 1938. Thank you, Tom. I'm so happy you told me this story about being here when you were 4, so that I could share it with all of us here in our audience. So I do want to take just a moment. I think Dr. Levine has covered almost everyone in thanking them, but it doesn't ever hurt to thank somebody more than once. So I do want to thank former Mayor Francis Slay and the Board of Aldermen who helped to move the legislation forward that made this happen. Now, when you have donors step up and when you have the History Museum step up, I will say I don't think that was a very heavy lift for them, but we still, of course, thank them sincerely for making this possible and for making not just the restoration of this building possible, but also for restoring the Court of Honor, which is something that many people have told me they really had not noticed very much before today. And I think that when you look this way and when you have the opportunity to walk around this Court of Honor, it is truly something special. I do want to say that Dr. Fran Levine, Karen Gehring, and the entire staff of the Missouri History Museum, we cannot thank them enough for this. One, for overseeing and directing the reconstruction and the exhibits, but also for helping to operate or for operating this building going forward. I was in this building 4 or 5 or 6 years ago, and I must admit that I was embarrassed that we had not taken better care of the absolutely fabulous artifacts that we have here and of this building. So it is such an honor to be here today for this reopening. I do want to say that the architects, Mackie Mitchell and of course Gene Mackey, who unfortunately passed away, BSI constructors, all of the craftsmen, these are skilled craftsmen who put this building back together and restored it, and who put their personal touches into the restoration. JDS Masonry, St. Louis Antique Lighting, and my friend Gary Beam, I don't know if he is here today, but he restores lighting in historic buildings around the world, Ford Marble and Tile, and many others, really have done a fabulous job. If you have not been in here yet, you'll get to see it here in just a few minutes. Most importantly, I want to give thanks to the soldiers of the St. Louis region, those men and women who gave their lives for our country, and the veterans who served locally and abroad, and the active duty members of our military. This museum, this memorial, this monument is for all of you. We are eternally grateful for the commitment and the sacrifices that you have made. Thank you all for being here this morning. I know that you will be able to check out the building and the exhibits and take a look at the beautiful Court of Honor and enjoy this wonderful landmark, which in St. Louis fashion is free and open to the public. Thank you.
Now I'd like to welcome, we are a region, and it's great that we're performing as a region this morning, so I'd like to welcome to the podium the Honorable Steve Sanger, St. Louis County Executive. Steve?
Morning, everyone, and thank you. I want to extend my congratulations and admiration to those who worked so hard these past few years to renovate the Soldiers Memorial Military Museum. You updated and improved upon what had already been a spectacular building, and you did so without sacrificing its architectural and historical legacy. It's so well done. This memorial honors those who fought for America in conflicts dating back to the War of 1812. Most who served were young people, kids really, thrust into battles far beyond Missouri's borders. Many would never return home. They fought for America. They put their lives on the line, trusting that they were serving a righteous cause, that they were fighting for the greater good of their nation and indeed the world. We owe an immense debt to our veterans. We should take from this beautiful memorial a resolve to ensure that Missouri soldiers did not fight and die in vain. Proper respect for those who served in our armed forces requires that we give some measure of ourselves, that we recognize our personal obligation to protect for future generations the freedoms for which these soldiers went to war. It requires that we extend a spirit of civility toward our fellow citizens, even those with whom we may disagree. Again, I thank you very much. God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you.
As I mentioned earlier, a project of this magnitude cannot succeed unless there is cooperation among elected officials, and we're going to hear from some this morning who had a lot to do with this project. They mentioned the Board of Aldermen, but the leader of the Board of Aldermen, the president of the Board of Aldermen, is Lewis Reed, who was really instrumental in driving this legislation through the board. So, President Reed.
Good morning. You know, when you think about what this monument means and this opening means, and you think about the ultimate sacrifice that a lot of Americans have given, and you think about us as a nation, we have to really be so thankful for our Declaration of Independence, especially when it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, that amongst them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That passage set the moral compass for our nation. That passage set at the core of Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. That passage set at the core of what drove Martin Luther King to Washington for change. And that passage sits at the core of all of those who've gone on and sacrificed so much for our nation, so much so that we can enjoy those rights that come from that. Those rights that give us the rights to go to whatever school we want to go to. Those same rights that allow us to work where we want to work. Those same rights that allow us to do the small things like shop where we want to shop. those things we take for granted every day as Americans. Those things we take for granted, many Americans have fought and died so that we can enjoy those rights. That's what this means today. And that's why I'm thankful as a father of four. That's why I'm thankful as a husband. That's why I'm thankful as a brother and a son to be able to be on this stage today and to be able to take part in this dedication today. I want to thank everybody that played a role in this opening. I want to thank the Crawford Taylor Foundation. Let's give them a big round of applause. Thank Fran and her staff and all of the developers and everybody that played a role in this reopening today. And finally, let's give one more big round of applause to all the families that are here today whose family members have gone on to serve our nation so that we can enjoy those rights that we take for granted each and every day as Americans. Thank you so much.
So now the third member of the Board of Estimate, I'd like to welcome to the podium the Honorable Darlene Green, Comptroller for the City of St. Louis.
Good morning, everyone. It is an honor for me to be here this morning to join you. This is a great day for the City of St. Louis. As we commemorate the grand reopening of the Soldiers Memorial, I want to first thank the Missouri History Museum for leading the way. And I also want to thank the donors who so generously provided the funds to see this essential project to its completion. Today, we are blessed to have a beautiful, accessible destination museum for all to enjoy for many generations to come. I want to thank the men and women who have served our country, protecting all of the people who depend on the freedoms and values, core values, as you've just heard, that we are endowed by our Creator with certain rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Dedicated in 1936, Soldiers Memorial was built to honor the local service members who died in World War I. It is fitting and poignant today that this rededication and the expansion of the memorial to include more historic artifacts and storytelling is complete in time to recognize the 100th anniversary of the Armistice of 1918. We wouldn't be where we are today in this country without the sacrifices of the brave men and women of our armed forces, including reservists, actives, and those who have made the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our great nation. So on behalf of the Office of the Comptroller, thank you again to the Missouri History Museum Society, to the generous donors, to all the supporters and participants, and to our armed service members for making this day possible for all of us in St. Louis and in the St. Louis region. God bless you, and God bless America.
And what I'd like to do now is introduce somebody who I know very well. I've known her since she was a little girl, and she is the daughter of a Vietnam veteran, Tushar Jones, Treasurer of the City of St. Louis.
Good morning. I'm Tushar Jones. I'm the treasurer of the city of St. Louis, and I'd like to thank you for having me here today to reopen this beautiful memorial to those who've served our country. As Tom mentioned, I'm the daughter of a Vietnam veteran. Both of my grandfathers fought in World War I and World War II. My uncles fought in the Korean and Vietnam Wars, and I'm the cousin of too many veterans to count, so we are a military family. I'm honored to celebrate this occasion with you, and I'd like to take a moment to say thank you to them and to all St. Louis area veterans for their service. This beautiful memorial is about you and the sacrifices you made to keep the rest of us safe. I'd also like to take a moment to congratulate the Missouri Historical Society for their leadership on this renovation project. It's been 3 years, but it's definitely been worth the wait. It's been an absolute pleasure to work with Dr. Francis Levine and her staff at the Missouri Historical Society on this project. And after the ceremony is complete, I hope you have time to stay and explore the new museum and the exhibits in the renovated museum. The St. Louis region has long been steeped in military history, so it's appropriate that one of the new exhibits, St. Louis in Service, showcases the stories of service members from St. Louis. I look forward to spending time there with my son so we can learn more about our local soldiers and the city's role in wartime history. Again, thank you for inviting me to spend this wondrous occasion with you, and God bless.
Thank you, Tushar. So now I'm honored to introduce our distinguished keynote speaker, Brigadier General Jeannie Leavitt. General Leavitt is the commander of the Air Force Recruiting Station at Randolph Air Force Base, at Joint Base at San Antonio, Texas. General Leavitt has served in the Air Force since 1992 and has commanded at the flight squadron and wing levels. She is a graduate and former instructor of the U.S. Air Force Weapons School and has more than 3,000 hours as a command pilot with more than 300 air combat hours flown mostly over Afghanistan and Iraq. In 1993, General Leavitt became the first female fighter pilot in the United States Air Force. In addition to these military milestones, yes, that requires a round of applause. In addition to these military milestones, General Leavitt holds 3 master's degrees and served from June 2014 to April 2016 as the Principal Military Assistant to the United States Secretary of Defense. In addition to all of these accomplishments, Brigadier General Leavitt is also a native St. Louisan and a graduate of Bishop DuBourg High School. Please welcome to the podium Brigadier General Leavitt.
Good morning. Thank you so much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank the Missouri Historical Society and Dr. Fran Levine. You've been amazing. Elected officials, distinguished visitors, family and friends in attendance. I truly appreciate the invitation to join you today. It is my honor and privilege to be part of this ceremony. As I think people know, this museum was first dedicated in 1936, and the goal was to memorialize those 1,075 local service members who made the ultimate sacrifice during World War I. In 1938, on Memorial Day, the museum officially opened. And here we are, approaching Veterans Day, 80 years later, with the opportunity to rededicate this museum. The exhibits have expanded in scope to span from the American Revolutionary War to current conflicts in the Middle East. They capture the stories to be passed down through the generations. This museum honors and memorializes the St. Louis soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, and civilians who have stood ready to fight and win America's wars. When we visit these exhibits, we can pay tribute to those who served, those who fought, and especially those who gave their lives to protect and defend our great nation. The museum is beautiful, with incredible artifacts and oral histories. Flanking the entrances are 4 remarkable sculptures that represent courage, loyalty, sacrifice, and vision. In the museum, you will learn about the courage and loyalty of St. Louisans who have proudly served this country. You will also learn about the sacrifices of our service members and our families and loved ones on the home front. By remembering our past, we are better able to set our vision for the future. For more than 2 centuries, our country's military members have protected our ideals of freedom and democracy. Our country is unique in this world. We live in a nation founded on principles that all people are created equal, that all people have inalienable rights, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Our forefathers wrote the Constitution to guide our nation, to ensure domestic tranquility, to provide for the common defense, to promote the general welfare, and to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. All of our military members swear an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. As Congressman Clay said, freedom is not free. The cost comes in the form of America's blood and treasure. Sometimes we struggle to understand the meaning of such sacrifice, the loss of America's sons and daughters. Our military members know that our precious freedoms are worth fighting for, and we are willing to defend them with our lives. It is important for us to honor our fallen heroes because they are the reason we enjoy the freedoms of democracy. We are free to choose who we vote for in elections. We are free to practice the faith of our choice. We are free to have safe neighborhoods where our children can flourish. And we are free to control our destinies. Unlike other places around the world, we are not defined by our circumstances at birth. Through hard work and determination, we can create better lives for ourselves and for our children. We can live the American dream. At the Thursday night reception here at the museum, I had the honor of meeting Staff Sergeant Kemp, an Army Air Corps veteran from World War II. It was a wonderful experience to spend time with him. He is part of what is called the greatest generation. It was fascinating to hear his stories and perspective. We discussed how much the military has changed since his time in uniform. We shared our combat experiences. For him, it was as a B-24 tail gunner in the Pacific during World War II. For me, it was as an F-15E pilot over Afghanistan during Operation Enduring Freedom. Not everyone will be lucky enough to be able to sit down with Staff Sergeant Kemp and hear his stories. But this museum will continue to capture the stories and memories from our St. Louis veterans so they will be available for generations to come. Walking through the museum, there's a story of Army Lieutenant George Piercy, who was a St. Louis and assigned to the Philippines in 1940. Shortly after the U.S. entered World War II, Japan attacked the Philippines and captured the forces stationed there. Lieutenant Piercy was taken prisoner on Corregidor Island in May of 1942. Last summer, I had the opportunity to visit Corregidor Island with a group of flag officers and senior executive civilians from across the Department of Defense. Our Philippine tour guide spent the day taking us around the island, walking us through all the events that took place on that island during World War II. In Lieutenant Piercy's case, he spent 29 months as a prisoner of war, enduring horrific conditions and harsh treatment from his Japanese captors. On October 24, 1944, Piercy was on a ship that was bound for Japan when it was torpedoed. Piercy and more than 1,700 POWs perished that day. We honor the memory of those warriors who made the ultimate sacrifice on that day to defend our freedoms. And then there is the story of Captain Wendell O. Pruitt, a St. Louisan who was a Tuskegee Airman and one of the first African-American pilots to fly combat missions during World War II. Prior to 1940, African Americans were not allowed to fly U.S. military aircraft. Civil rights organizations exerted pressure on the government to change this policy. In 1941, the Army Air Corps stood up a pursuit squadron in Tuskegee, Alabama, made up of all African American personnel: pilots, navigators, maintenance, and support staff. They became known as the Tuskegee Airmen, or the Red Tails, based on their distinctive crimson tail markings. Despite segregation and discrimination, the Tuskegee Airmen became one of the most highly respected fighter groups of World War II. These are but a few of the many stories about St. Louis warriors and heroes captured in the Soldier Memorial Museum. Our military has seen an incredible evolution since the inception of our nation 243 years ago. During the American Revolution, the primary weapons were the musket, its attached bayonet, and the cannon. Today, we have the most advanced weapons on the planet, with speed, precision, stealth technology, and network systems. Our military can dominate across all domains: air, space, cyberspace, land, sea, and undersea. By maintaining a dominant military force, we can reduce the chances that we will need to engage in wars in the future. However, if our nation is threatened, we can focus all of our capabilities to bear to defeat our adversary. While we will fight future wars with our advanced weapons and technology, it will be our people who win those wars. This museum honors those who served to preserve democracy and protect our precious freedoms. It will also help inspire many from the next generation to serve in the defense of our country. We are looking for the talented youth of America, those with the required physical, moral, and mental strength to join us in the military. It is an honor to wear this uniform, to be part of something bigger than yourself. I would like to thank those who have served in the past, those who presently serve, and those who will serve in the future. You have chosen a noble profession. May God protect our service members around the world, and may God bless this great nation. Thank you.
I'd like to say to Tom Gilmore, I'm a half hour ahead of schedule, so we've moved this thing pretty quickly. So I know what everybody's dying to see is to get into the museum. So thank you, General Levitt, for those inspiring words, and thanks to everybody for joining us today. To those of you who are serving currently in the military or have served, we are grateful. To your families, we are grateful. And I think one of the great stories is a young firefighter sitting in the second row, and I've watched you. His little girl is with him, and it's cold. So what did he do? He took his coat off, and he has her wrapped in it, and that's who we are. I mean, that's really who we all are. So thank you. This museum will long stand as a monument to all your service, everybody who has served. Now that we ask that you please stay seated while the Missouri Military Academy Band enters. Once they are in place, we invite you to enter the museum along the 13th Street ramp, which is to my left, and commemorative pins are going to be handed out by the junior ROTC. So thank you all so very much for being here this morning.